Eleanor McAllister pressed her forehead against the cold glass of Henderson's general store and watched her children's breath form small clouds in the frozen air. 3 days without a proper meal. Christmas Eve. And inside her pocket, exactly 11 cents, not enough for a loaf of bread, not enough for anything that mattered. She had promised them supper tonight. She had lied. If you want to follow Eleanor's journey to the very end, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment telling us which city you're watching from. Now let's begin. The bell above Henderson's door announced Eleanor's entrance with a cheerful jingle that felt like mockery. She stepped inside her worn boots, leaving wet prints on the wooden floor, and immediately felt the warmth of the potbelly stove in the corner. Behind her, 3 small figures huddled together: Sam, with his jaw set hard like his father used to do, Will bouncing on his toes to stay warm, and Grace clutching the hem of Eleanor's threadbare coat with fingers red from cold. "Stay here by the stove," Eleanor said quietly. "Warm yourselves." "Ma, I ain't cold," Sam said, though his lips had turned slightly blue. "Don't argue with me. Not tonight." She walked toward the counter where Horace Henderson stood arranging tins of tobacco with the careful attention of a man who had nothing better to do on Christmas Eve. His wife Mabel sat on a stool nearby, her sharp eyes tracking Eleanor's movement like a hawk watching a field mouse. "Mrs. McAllister," Horace's greeting carried no warmth. "What can I do for you?" Eleanor's hand found the 11 cents in her pocket. She had rehearsed this moment 100 times on the walk into town, had practiced keeping her voice steady, her chin up, her dignity intact. "I need provisions," she said. "Flour, salt pork, maybe some beans if you have them." Horace exchanged a look with his wife, the kind of look that passed between people who had already made up their minds. "Your account's past due, ma'am. Has been since September." "I know." Eleanor swallowed hard. "I was hoping the children haven't eaten properly in 3 days. If I could just put a little more on credit, I'll pay you back come spring when I sell." "Sell what?" Mabel's voice cut through like a blade. "That worthless land. Those half-dead cattle." "Mabel," Horace said, but without conviction. "No, Horace. I've held my tongue long enough." Mabel slid off her stool and approached the counter. "Mrs. McAllister, your husband was a good man. God rest his soul. But he left you with nothing but debt and 3 mouths to feed. You've been putting food on credit for 4 months now. 4 months. And what have we seen in return? Nothing." Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I've paid what I could. Pennies. A few cents here and there while your bill grows longer." Mabel shook her head. "We're not a charity, Mrs. McAllister. We have our own family to think of." By the stove, Grace had begun to whimper. Will put his arm around his little sister, pulling her close. Sam stood rigid, his hands balled into fists at his sides, watching his mother with eyes that had grown too old for 12. "Please." The word cost Eleanor everything. "It's Christmas Eve. Just enough for tonight, for the children." "I'm sorry," Horace said, and he sounded like he meant it. "But we can't keep extending credit to folks who can't pay. You understand." "What I understand," Eleanor said slowly, "is that my children are hungry. What I understand is that I buried my husband 18 months ago, and I've been working myself to the bone trying to keep us together. What I understand is that I'm asking for flour and beans, not charity, and I'm asking you to trust that I'm good for it." Mabel let out a sharp laugh. "Trust Mrs. McAllister, the whole town knows your situation. The bank's going to take your land come February. Harlan Briggs himself told my husband, you'll be lucky if you're not living in a wagon by spring." The words landed like physical blows. Eleanor gripped the edge of the counter to steady herself. "That's enough, Mabel," came a voice from behind them. Eleanor turned. A man stood near the fabric section, holding a coil of rope and a handful of nails. She recognized him vaguely, Jasper Cole, owner of the biggest spread in the territory. She'd seen him in town a few times over the years, always at a distance. Tall, dark-haired, with the kind of quiet presence that made people notice him without trying. "This ain't your concern, Mr. Cole," Mabel said stiffly. "Reckon it is when you're talking to a lady that way. I'm stating facts." "You're being cruel." He said it matter-of-factly without heat, which somehow made it worse. "On Christmas Eve. To a woman with children." Mabel's face went red. "How dare you?" "Mabel." Horace put a hand on his wife's arm. "Mr. Cole is one of our best customers." "I don't care if he's the governor of Wyoming." But Mabel fell silent, her lips pressed into a thin line. Jasper Cole walked to the counter and set down the rope and nails. He didn't look at Eleanor, didn't acknowledge her humiliation, just reached into his coat pocket and pulled out several bills. "Whatever she needs," he said to Horace, "put it on my account." "No." Eleanor's voice came out sharper than she intended. "I didn't ask for your help." Now he looked at her. His eyes were dark brown, almost black in the lamplight, and they held no pity, just a steady, assessing gaze that made her feel seen in a way that was both uncomfortable and oddly grounding. "Didn't say you asked, ma'am." "I don't take charity." "Then don't call it that." He turned back to Horace. "She'll work it off. I need help at my place anyway. Cook quit last week and old Pete's biscuits could break a window." Horace looked uncertain. "Mr. Cole, I don't think—" "That's the arrangement. You'll get your money, she'll keep her pride, everybody's square." He pushed the bills across the counter. "Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to finish my business here so I can get home before the snow gets worse." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Horace reached for the bills, his fingers closing around them, with the quick certainty of a man who knew better than to argue with money. "What do you need, Mrs. McAllister?" His tone had shifted completely. "We've got fresh flour came in yesterday. Salt pork's good quality. And I think we still have some sugar left if you want something sweet for the little ones." Eleanor stood frozen, caught between pride and desperation. She could feel her children watching her from their spot by the stove. Could feel Sam's embarrassment radiating across the room. Could hear Grace's stomach growling in the sudden silence. "Ma!" Will's small voice broke through. "Does this mean we can have supper?" The simple question shattered something in Eleanor's chest. She looked at Jasper Cole, who had stepped back and was examining a display of leather gloves with exaggerated interest, giving her the privacy of his inattention. "Flour," she said finally, her voice rough. "Beans. Salt pork. And—" she hesitated. "A small bag of peppermint sticks. For the children." "I'll wrap it up," Horace said, already moving. Mabel remained silent, her arms crossed, her expression sour. But she made no further comment. It took 10 minutes for Horace to gather everything. Eleanor stood by the counter, her back straight, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere above his head. She didn't look at Jasper Cole. Couldn't bear to. When the provisions were wrapped in brown paper and tied with string, Eleanor gathered them in her arms. They weighed almost nothing, but they felt like the heaviest burden she'd ever carried. "Thank you," she said to Horace. The words tasted like ash. She walked to the door, collected her children with a look, and stepped out into the cold without a backward glance. The snow had started falling harder, now big wet flakes that stuck to everything they touched. Eleanor walked quickly, the children hurrying to keep pace. No one spoke until they were a block away from Henderson's, and then Sam broke the silence. "You shouldn't have let him do that." Eleanor didn't slow down. "Sam, people are gonna talk. They're gonna say you're taking handouts from Jasper Cole. They're gonna say—" "I know what they're gonna say." Eleanor's voice was tired. "And I don't care." "Pa wouldn't have let some stranger pay for our food." The words hit their mark. Eleanor stopped walking so abruptly that Will crashed into her from behind. "Your pa isn't here." She turned to face Sam, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Your pa is in the ground in the cemetery on the hill, and he left me with a farm. I can't run cattle, I can't feed, and 3 children who are starving on Christmas Eve. So you tell me, Sam, what exactly should I have done back there?" Sam's face crumpled for just a moment before he rebuilt his walls. "I'm just saying." "I know what you're saying, and you're right. Your pa was a proud man. So proud he wouldn't ask for help when the fence needed fixing. So proud he tried to break that horse by himself instead of getting assistance. So proud—" Her voice broke. She took a breath. "Pride doesn't fill bellies, Sam. It doesn't keep your brother and sister warm at night. And I am too tired to carry it anymore." The snow fell around them in silence. Will's hand found Eleanor's and squeezed. Grace pressed closer to her mother's side. Sam stood apart, his jaw working, his eyes wet. "I'm sorry, Ma. I didn't mean—" "I know you didn't." Eleanor reached out and pulled him into the embrace with the others. For a moment they stood there in the falling snow, 4 people holding on to each other against the cold and the dark, and everything else that threatened to pull them apart. "Let's go home." The walk back to the farm took over an hour. By the time they reached the small house with its sagging porch and its chimney that needed repair, everyone was shivering. Eleanor sent the children inside and carried the provisions to the kitchen, where she stood for a long moment just looking at them. Flour, beans, salt pork, peppermint sticks. Such simple things. Such ordinary things. And yet they represented everything she had lost: her independence, her pride, her ability to provide for her family without help. She began to cry. Quietly at first, then with great shuddering sobs that shook her whole body. She pressed her fist against her mouth to muffle the sound, not wanting the children to hear, but the tears wouldn't stop coming. 18 months of grief, of struggle, of pretending everything would be all right when she knew it wouldn't, it all came pouring out in that cold kitchen on Christmas Eve. "Ma." Grace stood in the doorway, her eyes wide and worried. Eleanor wiped her face quickly. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just the cold made my eyes water." Grace padded across the floor in her stocking feet and wrapped her arms around Eleanor's legs. "Don't be sad, Ma. It's Christmas." "I know, baby." "Will Sam still be mad?" "Sam isn't mad. He's just—" Eleanor searched for the right words. "He's trying to take care of us, like your pa used to. It's a lot for a boy his age." "I don't want Sam to be the pay," Grace said matter-of-factly. "He's too grumpy." Despite everything, Eleanor laughed. A real laugh that bubbled up from somewhere she'd thought was empty. "Don't tell him that." "I won't." Grace looked up at her with Thomas's eyes blue and trusting and impossible to disappoint. "Ma, are we gonna be okay?" Eleanor knelt down so she was at eye level with her daughter. She took Grace's small hands in her own and held them tight. "We're going to be just fine," she said. "I promise." It was a lie, and she knew it. But some lies were necessary. Some lies were the only thing standing between a child and the harsh truth of the world. She made supper that night: bean soup with salt pork, fresh bread from the new flour, and peppermint sticks for dessert. The children ate like they'd never seen food before, and Eleanor watched them with a mixture of love and despair that felt like it might tear her in two. After dinner, she read to them from the old Bible that had belonged to Thomas's mother. The Christmas story about a baby born in a stable because there was no room anywhere else. About wise men following a star. About hope arriving in the most unexpected places. Grace fell asleep first, then Will. Sam stayed awake longer, sitting by the fire, his face troubled. "I've been thinking," he said finally. "About what you said earlier." Eleanor set down the Bible. "What about it?" "You were right. Pa was proud. Too proud, maybe." Sam stared into the flames. "I remember when the McKennies offered to help us move the herd before that storm 2 years back. Pa said no. Said we could handle it ourselves. Lost 12 head that week. Your father was a good man. I know. But good ain't the same as smart, is it?" Eleanor felt her heart crack a little. Her boy was growing up too fast, learning lessons he shouldn't have to learn. "No," she said softly. "It isn't. That man today, Mr. Cole." Sam's jaw tightened. "I didn't like him paying for our food. Still don't. But maybe—" He stopped, struggled, continued. "Maybe accepting help don't make us weak. Maybe it just makes us practical." "When did you get so wise?" "Been spending too much time with old Widow Murphy." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "She says a lot of things that make sense when you think about them later." Eleanor reached over and squeezed his shoulder. "Get some sleep, Sam. We'll figure things out tomorrow." "What about the man's offer? The job at his ranch?" "I'll think about it." Sam nodded and headed for the loft, where he shared a bed with Will. At the latter, he paused. "Ma, I'm sorry. For what I said about Pa. I know you loved him." "I still do," Eleanor said. "I always will." She sat alone by the dying fire for a long time after the children were asleep, thinking about Thomas, who had been her whole world for 11 years. Thinking about Jasper Cole, who had stepped forward when no one else would. Thinking about Harlan Briggs at the bank and the February deadline that was coming like a freight train. She didn't have answers, didn't know how she was going to save the farm, keep her children fed, maintain any shred of the dignity she'd fought so hard to preserve. But for tonight, her children had full bellies and warm beds. For tonight, that would have to be enough. The fire crackled and popped, sending small sparks up the chimney into the darkness above. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in white, hiding the mud and the broken fences and all the evidence of a farm falling slowly apart. Eleanor closed her eyes and made a decision. Tomorrow she would ride out to Jasper Cole's ranch. She would accept the job he'd offered not as charity, but as honest work. She would pay back every cent, clear her conscience, and then she would find a way forward that didn't depend on anyone else's kindness. She was Eleanor McAllister. She had buried a husband, survived a year and a half of barely scraping by, and raised 3 children who still knew how to laugh despite everything. She would not be broken by this. Not by the bank. Not by the whispers of people like Mabel Henderson. Not by the crushing weight of grief that still caught her off guard at unexpected moments. She would survive. For Sam, who was trying so hard to be the man of the house. For Will, who still believed everything would work out. For Grace, who asked if they were going to be okay, and trusted the answer without question. For Thomas, who had loved her enough to build a life with her, even if that life had crumbled after he was gone. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. New humiliations, probably. New struggles she couldn't even imagine yet. But tomorrow she would face them standing up. Eleanor McAllister went to bed on Christmas Eve with a plan, a prayer, and a stubborn refusal to give up. The snow fell all night long, and when morning came, the world looked clean and new, as if it had been waiting for her to decide what she would make of it. The ride to Jasper Cole's ranch took nearly 2 hours through snow that reached past the horses' knees. Eleanor had borrowed the wagon from Clara Jenkins, who had asked no questions but pressed a jar of preserves into her hands with a look that said she understood everything. Sam sat beside her on the bench, his silence louder than any words. Will and Grace huddled in the wagon bed behind them, wrapped in every blanket they owned. The morning sun had broken through the clouds, making the snow glitter like scattered diamonds, but Eleanor barely noticed. Her mind was fixed on what lay ahead. "You don't have to come," she said to Sam for the 3rd time. "You could have stayed home with the others. And let you face him alone." Sam's jaw tightened. "No, ma'am. He's not an enemy, Sam. He's a stranger who thinks he can buy us. He thinks nothing of the sort." Eleanor kept her eyes on the road. "He offered work, honest work. There's no shame in that." Sam made a sound that might have been agreement or might have been disgust. Eleanor chose not to press him. The Cole Ranch announced itself with a wooden arch over the main road, the name burned into the crossbeam in letters that had weathered decades of Wyoming winters. Beyond it, the land opened up into rolling hills, dotted with cattle, more cattle than Eleanor had ever seen in one place. Fences stretched in every direction, well maintained and solid. The barn was twice the size of her entire house, painted red with white trim. And the main house, Eleanor's breath caught. It wasn't a mansion. Nothing like the fancy places she'd seen in photographs from back east. But it was substantial, built from timber and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides and smoke rising from 2 different chimneys. Windows caught the morning light. A dog barked somewhere behind the barn. "That's a lot of house for one man," Sam muttered. Eleanor didn't respond. She guided the wagon up the main drive past outbuildings and corrals until she reached the hitching post near the front porch. Before she could climb down, the front door opened. Jasper Cole stepped out dressed in work clothes, denim trousers, a heavy wool shirt, boots that had seen years of hard use. He looked different here than he had in Henderson's store. More at ease somehow. Like a man standing on ground that belonged to him. "Mrs. McAllister." He tipped his hat. "Wasn't sure you'd come." "I said I would." "Folks say a lot of things." Eleanor climbed down from the wagon, ignoring the hand he offered. "I'm not folks, Mr. Cole. I'm a woman who pays her debts." Something flickered in his eyes, amusement maybe, or respect. Fair enough. The children had scrambled out of the wagon bed. Will stood with his mouth open, staring at everything. Grace pressed close to Eleanor's side, and Sam positioned himself slightly in front of his mother, his posture rigid with mistrust. Jasper's gaze moved over each of them in turn, lingering longest on Sam. "You must be the eldest." "Samuel McAllister." Sam didn't offer his hand. "Sir." "Jasper Cole. Welcome to my place." The two stared at each other for a long moment. Eleanor felt the tension crackling between them like heat lightning before a storm. "Mr. Cole," she said quickly, "perhaps we should discuss the arrangement." "Of course." Jasper stepped back and gestured toward the house. "Come inside. Old Pete's got coffee on, and I think there might be some biscuits left from breakfast." "Biscuits?" Will's head swiveled toward the house with sudden interest. "Will," Eleanor said warningly, "let the boy eat." Jasper was already walking toward the porch. "Growing children need food. That's not charity, ma'am. That's common sense." Inside the house was warm and surprisingly comfortable. Not fancy, but well kept. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace, large enough to roast a whole pig. Leather furniture sat before it, worn soft from years of use. Books lined one wall, more books than Eleanor had seen outside of a schoolhouse. Old Pete turned out to be a weathered man somewhere north of 60, with skin like tanned leather and eyes that missed nothing. He set out coffee and biscuits without being asked, then retreated to a chair in the corner where he proceeded to whittle something that might have been a horse. "Sit," Jasper said. And it wasn't quite a command, but wasn't quite a request either. Eleanor sat. The children arranged themselves around her, Grace on her lap, Will on the floor by her feet, Sam standing behind her chair like a guard dog. "Here's what I'm thinking," Jasper said, settling into a chair across from her. "I need someone to cook and keep house. My last cook left 3 weeks ago, family emergency back in Missouri. Old Pete does his best, but my biscuits are fine," Old Pete said without looking up from his whittling. "Your biscuits could be used as ammunition, Pete." Builds character. Despite herself, Eleanor felt her lips twitch. Jasper caught it, and something warmed in his expression. "Point is, I need help. You need work. Seems like we can solve each other's problems." "What are the terms?" "Meals for me and Pete, keeping the house in order, laundry once a week." He paused. "Room and board for you and the children plus wages. $2 a week." Eleanor's heart stuttered. $2 a week was more than fair, it was generous. More than generous. With room and board included, she could save everything she earned. Could put money toward the bank debt. Could maybe, just maybe, keep the farm. "That's too much," she heard herself say. Jasper's eyebrows rose. "Most folks argue for more, not less. Most folks haven't been called a charity case in public." Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "I'll take fair wages, Mr. Cole. Nothing more." "Ma." Sam said quietly, a warning in his voice. Hush, Sam. Jasper studied her for a long moment. $1.50 a week, he said finally. Room and board. And the children can attend school in town. I'll see they have transport when the weather allows. The children? Eleanor stopped. She hadn't thought about school. Hadn't been able to think about anything beyond survival. That's very practical, Jasper cut in. Kids need education. Town's got a schoolhouse. No sense in them missing out because of a few miles distance. Why? Sam's voice was sharp. Why are you doing all this? You don't know us. You don't owe us anything. Sam. Eleanor twisted to look at her son. That's enough. No, ma'am. Let the boy ask. Jasper turned his attention to Sam, and something in his posture shifted, a subtle straightening, a squaring of shoulders, man to man. You want to know why? I do. Because I remember what it's like. Jasper's voice was quiet, but carried weight. My pa died when I was about your age, left my mother with a ranch she couldn't run and debts she couldn't pay. Folks in town, some helped, some didn't. The ones who didn't. He shook his head. I remember their faces. Remember how they looked at my mother like she was already beaten, like she was less than them because she needed help. Sam's rigid posture softened almost imperceptibly. My mother worked herself half to death keeping us afloat, Jasper continued. Took in laundry mending whatever she could find. And every single person who helped us, everyone, I remember them too. I made a promise to myself back then. When I had something to give, I'd give it. No questions, no judgment, no strings. That's a nice story, Sam said, but his voice had lost its edge. It's not a story, it's the truth. Jasper leaned forward. You want to hate me for helping your mother, that's your right. But don't mistake kindness for pity, son. I don't pity your family. I respect the hell out of a woman who walks into a store full of people who've already written her off and asks for what she needs anyway. Takes more courage than most men I know could muster. Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks. She looked down at Grace, who had fallen asleep against her shoulder to avoid meeting anyone's eyes. When would you want us to start? She asked. Tomorrow's fine. I'll send a wagon for your things. Jasper stood. There's a room upstairs used to be my mother's. 2-bed space for a third if we bring one up from storage. Should fit all of you comfortable enough. We have a home, Mr. Cole. I know you do, but it's a long ride in winter and the work starts early. Makes sense for you to stay here during the week. Go home on Sundays if you want. He paused. Your choice, of course. Always your choice. Eleanor thought about the farmhouse with its drafty windows and leaking roof. Thought about the dwindling woodpile and the empty root cellar. Thought about her children sleeping 3 to a bed because it was the only way to stay warm. We'll stay, she said. During the week. Good! Jasper nodded once, then turned to Will, who had been staring at him with undisguised fascination. You like horses, boy? Will's eyes went wide. Yes, sir. Got a mare in the barn just foaled last month. Prettiest little filly you ever saw. Want to see her? Will looked at Eleanor with such desperate hope that she couldn't have refused even if she'd wanted to. Go on, she said. But mind your manners. Will was out of his chair before she finished speaking. Jasper caught Eleanor's eye briefly, a silent acknowledgement of something she couldn't quite name, and then followed the boy out. The room felt different with him gone. Smaller somehow, though that made no sense. Ma'am? Old Pete set aside his whittling and fixed Eleanor with a penetrating stare. You want to know something about that man? Eleanor tensed. What's that? 15 years I've known him. Watched him build this place from nothing. Watched him lose his mother, lose a woman he loved, lose damn near everything that mattered. Old Pete shook his head slowly. Never once seen him offer what he offered you today. I don't understand. The house. The room that was his mother's. Old Pete's voice was gruff but not unkind. He don't let nobody in there. Not the cook who worked here 6 years. Not the hands who've been with him since the beginning. Nobody. Eleanor didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know what it meant or why it made her chest feel tight. I ain't saying nothing more than what I said. Old Pete picked up his whittling again. Just thought you ought to know. Sam had moved to the window and stood looking out at the snow-covered land. Eleanor watched him, saw the conflict in the set of his shoulders, the boy who wanted to hate Jasper Cole, warring with the boy who had just heard his own story reflected back at him. "Sam," she said quietly, "come sit with me." He came settling into the chair Jasper had vacated. For a moment, they just sat there, Grace sleeping between them, the fire crackling old Pete's knife making soft sounds against wood. "He lost his paw, too," Sam said finally. "When he was my age." "He did. Doesn't mean I have to like him." "No, it doesn't." Sam was quiet for a long moment. "But maybe I don't have to hate him either." Eleanor reached over and took her son's hand. He was 12 years old, trying to be a man carrying burdens no child should have to carry. And somehow, despite everything, he was still capable of reconsidering his judgments, still capable of grace. "That's all I ask," she said. The next morning, Jasper's wagon arrived at the McAllister farm just after dawn. Eleanor had spent the night packing clothes, a few precious books, her mother's quilt, Thomas's Bible. Everything else stayed behind, waiting for their Sunday returns, proof that they hadn't given up their home entirely. The ride back to the Cole ranch felt different than the day before. Less like a defeat, more like a beginning. Will chattered the entire way about the filly he'd seen, about how Mr. Cole had let him pet her soft nose, about how maybe if he was good, he'd get to learn to ride properly. Grace sang a song she'd made up, something about snow and horses and biscuits. Even Sam seemed less tense, though he still watched the approaching ranch with wary eyes. Eleanor's first day of work began before the sun had fully risen. She found her way to the kitchen, a large, well-equipped room that would have made her mother weep with envy, and started breakfast. Eggs, bacon, biscuits that actually resembled food, strong coffee. Old Pete appeared, first grunted what might have been approval at the spread, and took his plate to the corner. Jasper came in a few minutes later, already dressed for work. "You didn't have to start this early," he said, surveying the table. "Work starts early, you said." "For me, not necessarily for you." Eleanor set a plate in front of him with perhaps more force than necessary. "Mr. Cole, I'm not here to sleep late and collect wages. I'm here to work. If you have a problem with that, no problem." He held up his hands in surrender. "Just not used to it is all." He ate quickly and efficiently, the way men did when they had places to be. But before he left, he stopped at the door. "The children," he said. "School doesn't start again until after New Year's. If they get restless, they're welcome to explore. The barn, the horses, whatever catches their interest. Just tell them to stay away from the bullpen in the south pasture." "I will. Thank you." He nodded and was gone. The days fell into a rhythm faster than Eleanor expected. She cooked, cleaned, mended clothes that had been neglected since the last cook left. The work was hard but familiar, and there was satisfaction in doing it well. In seeing Jasper's quiet appreciation when she served a meal that wasn't burnt or tasteless. In watching old Pete actually finish a plate of biscuits without complaint. Will became Jasper's shadow within 3 days. The rancher tolerated it with surprising patience, answering the boy's endless questions about cattle and horses and fencing and everything else that crossed his 8-year-old mind. He taught Will how to hold a lasso, how to approach a horse so it wouldn't spook, how to read the sky for weather signs. "Your boy's got a good eye," Jasper told Eleanor one evening after supper. "Quick learner. He's always been curious. Curiosity's a gift. Most folks lose it as they get older. World beats it out of them." He paused. "Somebody ought to make sure that doesn't happen to him." Grace, meanwhile, had appointed herself old Pete's assistant. She sat beside him for hours, while he whittled, chattering about everything and nothing while he worked in silence. He never told her to go away, never seemed annoyed by her presence. Once Eleanor found him teaching her how to hold the knife properly, his gnarled hands guiding her small ones with surprising gentleness. "She's a good one," Pete said when he noticed Eleanor watching. "Reminds me of my daughter." "I didn't know you had a daughter." "Did." His face closed off. "Long time ago." Eleanor didn't ask more. Sam was the holdout. He did his chores without complaint. Jasper had assigned him small tasks around the barn, things that made him useful without being beyond his abilities, but he maintained a careful distance. Spoke when spoken to, answered questions with as few words as possible, retreated to the room they shared whenever his work was done. Jasper didn't push. Didn't try to win the boy over with gifts or attention or false friendliness. He simply treated Sam with the same respect he'd treat any man, and waited. The breakthrough came on the 5th day. Eleanor was in the kitchen preparing supper when she heard raised voices from the barn. She wiped her hands and hurried outside, her heart pounding. Inside the barn, she found Sam squared off against 2 ranch hands, young men barely out of their teens, with the swagger of boys who thought themselves men. They had Sam backed against a stall door, their postures aggressive. "Think you're something special, don't you?" one of them was saying. "Living up in the big house with the boss while the rest of us sleep in the bunkhouse." "I didn't ask for special treatment," Sam said. His voice was steady, but Eleanor could see his hands shaking. "No, your mama asked for it." The second hand laughed. "Pretty convenient, ain't it? Widow shows up with a sob story, and suddenly she's living in Cole's house, cooking his meals, warming his—" "Don't." Sam's voice went cold. "Don't you dare finish that sentence." "Or what, you gonna make me, little boy?" Sam moved before Eleanor could intervene. He threw himself at the larger hand fists, swinging. The impact knocked them both to the ground, but the ranch hand was bigger, stronger. Within seconds he had Sam pinned, his arm drawn back for a punch that would do real damage. "Enough!" Jasper's voice cut through the barn like a whip crack. He stood in the doorway, his expression harder than Eleanor had ever seen it. The ranch hand scrambled to his feet. "Mr. Cole, I heard what you were just doing." Jasper walked forward, each step deliberate. "I heard every word." "The kid attacked us?" "After you insulted his mother." Jasper stopped directly in front of the hand who'd been about to throw the punch. "A woman who's done nothing but work hard and keep her head up in circumstances that would break most people. A woman who deserves respect, not whatever filth you were about to spew." "Boss, I didn't mean—" "Get your things, both of you. You're done here." The silence that followed was absolute. The 2 hands stared at Jasper in disbelief. "You're firing us," the second one said. Over her, "I'm firing you over conduct unbecoming of men who work for me." Jasper's voice was ice. "I pay fair wages, provide decent quarters, and ask only 2 things in return: hard work and basic human decency. You failed on the second count. So yes, you're done. Collect your pay from the foreman and be off my land by morning." The hands left without another word, though the looks they shot at Eleanor and Sam promised trouble. When they were gone, Jasper turned to Sam. The boy stood with his fists still clenched, blood trickling from a split lip, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "You all right?" Jasper asked. Sam nodded jerkily. "That was brave what you did. Stupid, but brave." Jasper reached out and clasped Sam's shoulder. "A man stands up for his family. That's not something anybody teaches you. Either you have it in you or you don't. You've got it." Sam's composure cracked. Just for a second, just long enough for Eleanor to see the boy beneath the armor. "Thank you," Sam said, his voice rough. Thank you." "Nothing to thank me for. Those men were a problem waiting to happen." Jasper squeezed Sam's shoulder once, then released him. "Go get cleaned up. Your mother's probably got supper ready, and if we're late, she'll have both our hides." Sam walked toward the barn door, passing Eleanor without meeting her eyes. She reached out and caught his arm. I'm proud of you, she said quietly. I know, Ma. He glanced back at Jasper, then at her. Maybe he's not so bad. Maybe not. Sam headed for the house. Eleanor stayed her eyes on Jasper, who had turned to examine one of the horses with what seemed like unnecessary attention. You didn't have to fire them, she said. Yes, I did. They'll talk. Tell people in town that you let them talk. Jasper finally looked at her. I don't give a damn what folks in town think of me, Mrs. McAllister. Never have. Eleanor. He blinked. What? My name is Eleanor. Mrs. McAllister was my mother-in-law, and she's been dead for 7 years. She took a breath. If we're going to be living in your house working alongside each other every day, you might as well call me by my name. Jasper was silent for a moment. Then slowly he nodded. Eleanor. The way he said it, careful like he was testing the weight of it, made something flutter in her chest. In that case, you'd better call me Jasper. Mr. Cole makes me feel like my father. Jasper. She tried it out. It felt strange on her tongue. Strange, but not unwelcome. Supper's probably getting cold, he said. It probably is. Neither of them moved. Eleanor. He said her name again, and this time there was something underneath it. Something that made her breath catch. I want you to know those men, what they said, it's not why I offered you this job. It's not why I asked you to stay in the house. I'm not looking for, I know. She cut him off before he could finish, before either of them had to acknowledge what he was denying. I know that. Good. He cleared his throat. We should probably, yes, we should. They walked back to the house together, not touching, not speaking, but something had shifted between them. Something small but significant, like the first crack in ice before spring. At supper that night, Sam sat beside Jasper for the first time. They talked about the ranch, Sam asking questions about the cattle operation, Jasper answering with patient detail. Will interrupted constantly with his own questions, and Grace made everyone laugh by announcing that she was going to marry old Pete when she grew up because he made the best wooden horses. I'm honored, Miss Grace, Pete said solemnly. But I think you might want to wait a few years before making that decision. Why? Because I'm old and ornery, and I snore like a freight train. That's okay. Mama says Papa used to snore too. The table went quiet. Eleanor felt the air tighten around her, felt the ghost of Thomas pass through the room like a cold wind. He did, she said softly. Like a freight train, just like Pete said. Grace beamed satisfied. Will and Sam exchanged glances. And Jasper. Jasper looked at Eleanor with an expression she couldn't quite read. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition. The look of someone who knew what it cost to speak of the dead casually, to let them exist in everyday conversation without falling apart. After the children were in bed, Eleanor sat by the fire in the main room mending one of Will's shirts. She expected to be alone. Jasper usually disappeared into his study after supper, but tonight he settled into the chair across from her with a book and a glass of whiskey. They sat in silence for a long time. Companionable silence, the kind that didn't require filling. Can I ask you something? Eleanor said finally. You can ask. Might not answer. Fair enough. She set down her mending. Old Pete said the room we're staying in, the one that was your mother's, he said you don't let anyone in there. Jasper's hand stilled on his glass. Pete talks too much. He barely talks at all. Then he's talked too much for Pete. Jasper took a long drink. My mother died in that room 5 years ago. I've kept it closed ever since. I'm sorry. If it's too painful to have us there. That's not why I kept it closed. He stared into the fire. I kept it closed because I was waiting. Waiting for what? I don't know. Something. Someone. He shook his head. That sounds crazy. It doesn't. His eyes met hers across the firelight. It felt right is all. offering that room to you. First time in 5 years it's felt right to open that door. Eleanor didn't know what to say, didn't know what any of this meant or where it was going. All she knew was that her heart was beating too fast and her hands weren't steady, and she should probably go to bed before she said or did something she'd regret. I should... She stood gathering her mending. Eleanor. She stopped. I'm glad you came here. He said it simply without expectation. Whatever happens. I'm glad. So am I, she said, and realized with something like surprise that she meant it. She climbed the stairs to her children, to the room that had belonged to his mother, to the bed where she lay awake for hours, listening to the wind howl outside and wondering what the morning would bring. The weeks that followed settled into something Eleanor hadn't expected comfort. She woke each morning before dawn, made breakfast for a household that had begun to feel less like an obligation and more like a home, and found herself looking forward to the small moments that punctuated her days. Will's laughter echoing from the barn, Grace's endless chatter with old Pete, Sam's slow, reluctant warming toward the man who had taken them in, and Jasper. She tried not to think about Jasper, tried not to notice the way his eyes found hers across the supper table, tried not to feel the brush of his fingers when he handed her a cup of coffee in the early morning darkness, before the children woke, tried not to wonder what he meant when he said he was glad she'd come, but trying and succeeding were different things. It was the 3rd week of January when the letter arrived. Eleanor was kneading bread dough when she heard the wagon pull up outside. Through the kitchen window she watched Jasper speak with the writer, accept an envelope, and stand for a long moment reading its contents. Even from this distance, she could see his shoulders tighten. He came inside without knocking. They'd moved past that particular formality days ago and set the letter on the kitchen table. It's addressed to you, he said. Care of my ranch. From Harlan Briggs. Eleanor's hands stilled in the dough. The bank. Reckon so. She wiped her hands on her apron and picked up the envelope. The paper was expensive, the handwriting precise. She read it once, then again, trying to make the words mean something different than what they said. Eleanor. Jasper's voice was gentle. What is it? The deadline's been moved up. She heard her own voice as if from a great distance. February 1st instead of February 15th. He says market conditions have changed. Says he's had an offer on the property from an interested buyer. That's 2 weeks from now. 11 days, actually. She set the letter down with deliberate care. He's giving me 11 days to come up with $243, or I lose everything. The number hung in the air between them. $243. More money than Eleanor had ever seen in one place. More than she could earn in a year of cooking and cleaning. More than the farm itself was worth, probably given its current condition. There has to be something, Jasper said. Something we can do. Eleanor looked at him sharply. This isn't your problem, Jasper. The hell it isn't. My husband's debt. My land. My responsibility. Your children's home. He stepped closer, and she could feel the heat of him, the solid presence that had become so familiar. Sam and Will and Grace, they grew up on that farm. Their father is buried on that land. You telling me that's not worth fighting for? Of course it's worth fighting for. Eleanor's voice cracked. But some fights can't be won. Some things are just... She stopped, pressed her fist against her mouth. She would not cry. Not now. Not in front of him. Just what lost. The word came out as a whisper. Some things are just lost, and no amount of fighting changes that. Jasper stood silent for a long moment. Then he reached out and took her hand, the first time he had touched her, deliberately, intentionally, and held it between both of his. I have money, he said. Enough to pay off the bank 10 times over. Eleanor went rigid. No. Eleanor. I said no. She pulled her hand free. I didn't come here to be someone's charity case, Jasper. I came here to work, to earn an honest wage, to pay my debts through my own labor. If I let you hand me $200 like it's nothing, it is nothing, not to me. But it's everything to me. Her eyes burned. Don't you understand? It's the only thing I have left. My self-respect. The knowledge that whatever happens, I didn't just roll over and let someone else fix my problems. I've already taken too much from you. I can't take this too. Can't or won't? Does it matter? Jasper's jaw tightened. She watched him fight with himself, watched the frustration war with understanding across his features. Finally, he stepped back. All right, he said. Your decision. I'll respect it. Thank you. But Eleanor... He paused at the kitchen door. If you change your mind, if it comes down to losing that farm or accepting help from someone who... He stopped, started again. The offer stands. Whatever you need. No strings, no obligations. Just one person helping another. He left before she could respond. Eleanor stood alone in the kitchen, flour on her hands, tears streaming down her face, and wondered when she had become the kind of woman who couldn't tell the difference between pride and stupidity. That night, the temperature dropped. Eleanor felt it in her bones as she put the children to bed, that particular ache that meant serious cold was coming. She lay awake listening to the wind pick up, rattling the windows, howling around the corners of the house like something alive and hungry. By morning, the world had turned white. Snow had fallen through the night and showed no signs of stopping. The drifts against the barn reached nearly to the roofline. The cattle huddled together in the corrals, their breath forming clouds in the bitter air. Jasper was already dressed and heading out when Eleanor came downstairs. Stay inside today, he said. All of you. This storm's going to get worse before it gets better. Where are you going? Got to check on the herds in the north pasture. Make sure they've got shelter. He pulled on his heavy coat, his gloves. Pete'll stay here. Anything happens, you find him. Be careful. He paused at the door and looked at her. Really looked the way he did sometimes. That made her feel like he was seeing everything she tried to hide. Always am, he said, and was gone. The day passed slowly. Eleanor kept the children occupied with chores and games, trying not to let her anxiety show. The storm grew fiercer as the hours wore on. By mid-afternoon, she could barely see the barn through the blowing snow. By evening, the world outside the windows had become a solid wall of white. Jasper didn't return. He'll be fine. Old Pete said at supper, but his eyes kept drifting to the window, and his whittling knife stayed still in his hands. Man knows this land better than anyone. Probably holed up somewhere waiting out the worst of it. Probably. Eleanor agreed and tried to believe it. She put the children to bed early, then sat by the fire with Pete, neither of them speaking, both of them listening to the wind. At 10 o'clock, she heard something, a sound beneath the howling, like a voice calling. She was on her feet before she knew she was moving. Stay here, Pete said, reaching for his coat. No. Eleanor was already at the door. I'm coming with you. They pushed out into the storm together, the cold hitting Eleanor like a physical blow. The snow was thigh-deep in places, and the wind nearly knocked her off her feet. She could see nothing, only white, endless white, and somewhere in that white, a voice. Jasper! She screamed his name into the wind. Jasper! Over here! Pete's shout came from somewhere to her left. Eleanor, over here! She fought through the snow toward his voice, and found them, Pete kneeling beside a dark shape in the drift, a shape that moved weakly as she approached. Jasper. He was covered in ice, his face gray with cold, his body shaking so violently she could see it even through the storm. His horse was nowhere to be seen. Horse spooked, he managed through chattering teeth. Through me. Been walking. Don't know how long. Help me get him up, Pete said. Together they hauled Jasper to his feet. He could barely stand, his legs giving out beneath him. Eleanor ducked under his arm, taking his weight against her shoulder. feeling how cold he was even through layers of clothing. "Come on," she said. "Stay with me. Just a few more steps." The distance to the house felt like miles. By the time they stumbled through the door, Eleanor was gasping for breath, and Jasper had stopped shaking, a worse sign she knew than the shaking itself. "Get him by the fire," Pete ordered. "We need to warm him up, slowly. Too fast and it'll kill him." They stripped off his frozen clothes, Eleanor's hands moving efficiently, despite the terror clawing at her chest, and wrapped him in blankets. Pete built up the fire until the room was almost unbearably hot. Eleanor sat beside Jasper on the floor, rubbing his hands between her own, talking to him in a steady stream she couldn't have repeated if her life depended on it. "Stay awake," she said. "Jasper, you have to stay awake. Look at me. Keep your eyes on me." "Eleanor." His voice was a rasp. "The cattle. In the north pasture. I don't care about the cattle. They'll die. Storm this bad. Let them die." She gripped his face between her hands, forced him to meet her eyes. "Do you hear me? Let them all die. I don't care. Just stay awake. Just keep breathing. Please." Something flickered in his gaze. Surprise maybe, or wonder. "Didn't know you cared." "Don't be an idiot." She was crying now, couldn't stop. "Of course I care. Of course I—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't say the words that crowded her throat. Because saying them would make them real, and real things could be lost, and she had already lost so much. "Eleanor." Jasper's hand found hers, his grip weak but deliberate. "I was wrong. Earlier. About your pride." "What are you talking about? You said your self-respect was all you had left." His eyes held hers. "That's not true. You've got those children upstairs who think you hung the moon. You've got strength that most people couldn't imagine. And you've got—" He stopped, coughed. "You've got me. If you want me. Jasper. I know it's too soon. No, you're not ready. No, you might never be ready." His voice was fading exhaustion and cold, pulling him under. "But I needed you to know. Before, just in case, needed you to know." "In case of what?" Eleanor's heart was hammering. "In case you die." "You're not dying, Jasper Cole. I won't allow it. Do you hear me? I won't allow it." A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. "Yes, ma'am. I mean it. You don't get to say something like that and then leave me. That's not fair." "Never said I was fair." His eyes were closing. "Just said I was yours. If you wanted." He slipped into unconsciousness before she could respond. Eleanor sat beside him through the night, holding his hand, watching his chest rise and fall, bargaining with God and fate, and anything else that might be listening. She thought about Thomas dead in the ground at the farm she couldn't save. Thought about all the years she'd loved him, all the years she'd grieved him. Thought about how she'd believed that part of her heart was closed forever, buried with her husband in the cold Wyoming earth. She thought about Jasper Cole, who had bought her groceries without asking for thanks, who had given her work and a room and dignity when she'd had nothing, who had defended her honor and fired men who'd insulted her, who had told her about his mother's room, about the feeling that he'd been waiting for something, for someone. "Don't you dare die," she whispered to his sleeping form. "Don't you dare." By morning, his fever had broken. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world transformed. Snow drifted high against every building, the air crystalline and still, the sky a blue so pure it hurt to look at. Eleanor was still sitting beside him when his eyes opened. "You're here," he said, his voice rough but stronger. "Where else would I be?" He looked at her, at the circles under her eyes, the exhaustion written across her face, the hand that still held his, and something shifted in his expression. Something that looked almost like hope. "Did you mean it?" Eleanor asked before she could lose her nerve. "What you said last night, did you mean it? Every word? Even the part about being mine? Especially that part?" Eleanor closed her eyes. She could feel the weight of the past 18 months pressing down on her. The grief, the struggle, the constant fear. She could feel Thomas's ghost hovering at her shoulder, waiting to see what she would do. "I'm not ready," she said slowly. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready. I loved my husband. Part of me will always love him. And I have children to think about, and a farm I'm about to lose, and I know." Jasper squeezed her hand. "I'm not asking for promises, Eleanor. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just telling you how I feel. What you do with that information is up to you." "What if I can't give you what you want?" "What I want is for you to be happy, whether that's with me or without me." He struggled to sit up, winced, settled for propping himself against the chair behind him. "I've spent 5 years alone in this house, Eleanor. 5 years eating meals by myself, talking to nobody but Pete, watching the seasons change without anyone to share them with. I told myself I was fine with it, told myself I didn't need anyone. And now I know I was lying." His eyes never left hers. "You and those children, you've filled up spaces in this house I forgot were empty. You've made me remember what it feels like to matter to someone. And I don't want to go back to the way things were. I can't." Eleanor felt tears building again. "Jasper, you don't have to answer now. Don't have to answer ever if you don't want to. But I needed you to know the truth. Whatever happens with the farm, whatever happens with Briggs and the bank, you've got a place here. All of you. For as long as you want it." Before Eleanor could respond, footsteps thundered on the stairs. Will burst into the room, followed by Sam and Grace, all three of them wide-eyed with relief and excitement. "Mr. Cole!" Will launched himself at Jasper with enough force to make the man grunt. "Pete said you almost died. He said Ma saved you. Did she now?" Jasper caught Will with one arm, his eyes finding Eleanor's over the boy's head. "She did," Grace announced solemnly. "Old Pete said she sat with you all night and wouldn't let go of your hand. He said, 'That's enough, Grace.'" Eleanor's cheeks burned. "Mr. Cole needs rest, not interrogation." "I'm fine." Jasper was still looking at her. "Never been better, actually." Sam had hung back near the door, watching the scene with an expression Eleanor couldn't quite read. Now he stepped forward. "I'm glad you're all right, sir," he said. "When you didn't come back last night—" He stopped, swallowed. "We were worried." "We—" Jasper raised an eyebrow. "I was worried." Sam's voice was rough. "I know I haven't been. I know I've been." He struggled for words. "You've been good to us, better than we deserved. I should have said so before." "Sam," Jasper held out his free hand. "Come here." Sam crossed the room slowly, as if approaching something that might bolt. Jasper gripped his shoulder the way he had that day in the barn, the day of the fight. "You don't owe me anything," Jasper said. "Not gratitude, not trust, not anything you're not ready to give. But I want you to know, whatever happens, I think your father would be proud of you. The way you've stepped up for your family. The way you've carried burdens no boy your age should have to carry. That takes a man's courage, and you've got it in spades." Sam's composure cracked. For just a moment, Eleanor saw her son as he really was, not the man he was trying to become, but the boy who still missed his father, who was still scared, who still needed someone to tell him he was doing all right. "Thank you," Sam whispered. "Sir." "Jasper," he corrected. "I think we're past sir by now." Sam nodded jerkily. "Jasper." The moment broke when Grace announced that she was hungry, and old Pete wasn't allowed to make breakfast because his eggs tasted like leather. Eleanor shooed the children toward the kitchen, promising pancakes, leaving Jasper to rest. But at the door she paused. "We're not done talking," she said. "About what you said." "I know. I just need time to think." "Take all the time you need." Jasper settled back against the pillows. exhaustion clearly catching up with him. "I'm not going anywhere." Eleanor nodded and left him there, her heart full of feelings she couldn't name. Her mind spinning with possibilities she'd never let herself imagine. In the kitchen, she made pancakes while her children laughed and argued and filled the room with noise. Old Pete sat in his corner, whittling, pretending not to watch her with those knowing eyes. "Storm's past," he said eventually. "Weather'll clear up by tomorrow. You'll be able to get to town." "I know. Bank deadline's coming up." "I know that too." Pete was quiet for a moment. "He'd give you everything you know, if you asked. Man's been waiting his whole life for someone to need him the way you do." "I know." Eleanor flipped a pancake with more force than necessary. "That's what scares me." "Love usually does," Pete said, "but that don't make it wrong." He went back to his whittling, leaving Eleanor alone with her thoughts and her fears and the growing certainty that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't control for better or worse. 3 days after the storm, Jasper was back on his feet, moving carefully but stubbornly refusing to stay in bed. Eleanor watched him push through the pain and exhaustion, and something in her chest ached with a feeling she refused to name. The deadline loomed closer with every passing hour. 8 days. 7. 6. She hadn't brought up his confession again. Neither had he. But the words hung between them in every glance, every accidental touch, every moment of silence that stretched just a beat too long. On the 5th day before the deadline, Jasper found her alone in the kitchen, scrubbing pots with a fury that had nothing to do with cleaning. "You're going to wear a hole through that," he said from the doorway. Eleanor didn't look up. "It needed scrubbing. It's been scrubbed 3 times today." She set down the pot with a clang. "What do you want, Jasper?" He crossed the room and sat at the table, moving slowly, still favoring his left side, where he'd hit the ground when the horse threw him. "I want to talk about the farm." "There's nothing to talk about." "There's everything to talk about." He waited until she turned to face him. 5 days, Eleanor. In 5 days, Harlan Briggs is going to take your land. Your children's home. Everything Thomas built." "You think I don't know that?" Her voice came out sharper than she intended. "You think I haven't been counting every hour, every minute? I think you've been so busy counting that you've forgotten there might be another way. Your money. We've been over this." "Not my money." Jasper's eyes held hers. "Me." Eleanor went still. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying marry me." The words dropped into the silence like stones into deep water. Eleanor felt them ripple through her, disturbing everything they touched. "Jasper, hear me out." He leaned forward. "As my wife, what's mine becomes yours, legally, automatically. The bank can't touch you, can't touch the children. The farm stays in the family." "That's not you can't." "I can, I am." His voice was steady, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the edge of the table. "It solves everything. 1 trip to the preacher, and Briggs can go to hell." "And what about you?" Eleanor's throat was tight. "What do you get out of this arrangement?" "You know what I get." "Say it." "You." The word was simple, raw. "I get you. And Sam and Will and Grace. I get a family. Something to come home to. Someone to share this life with." He paused. "That's worth more than any amount of money." Eleanor turned away, pressing her hands flat against the counter to stop them from shaking. "You're asking me to marry you to save my farm." "I'm asking you to marry me because I want to marry you. The farm is just an excuse." She spun back to face him. "A convenient reason for me to say yes when I might otherwise say no. Is that what you think this is?" "I don't know what to think." Her voice broke. 3 weeks ago, I was a stranger begging for credit at Henderson's store. Now you want to make me your wife? How am I supposed to believe this is real?" Jasper stood slowly, crossed to where she stood, and stopped just close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. Do you remember what I said the night of the storm? You said a lot of things. I said I was yours, if you wanted me. His hand came up, hesitated, then gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. That wasn't about the farm, Eleanor. That wasn't about money or debt or Harlan Briggs. That was about you. Just you. But if there was no farm, I'd still be standing here, still be asking. His thumb traced her cheekbone featherlight. The farm just makes the timing urgent. It doesn't change how I feel. Eleanor closed her eyes. She could feel herself weakening, feel the walls she'd built starting to crumble. It would be so easy to say yes, to let him save her, to fall into the safety he was offering and never look back. But easy wasn't the same as right. I can't, she whispered. Jasper's hand dropped. Can't or won't? Both. She opened her eyes, made herself meet his gaze. I can't marry you like this, Jasper. Not because I'm desperate. Not because it's the only way to save what Thomas left me. If I ever marry again... She stopped, steadied herself. It has to be because I choose it, not because I'm cornered. And what about the children? What about Sam and Will and Grace? Don't they deserve to keep their home? Don't. Eleanor's voice went hard. Don't you dare use my children to manipulate me. I'm not manipulating you. I'm asking you to think about... I think about nothing else. The words exploded out of her. Every second of every day I think about them, about what I owe them, about what I can't give them, about how I've failed them in every way that matters. Tears were streaming down her face now, but she didn't care. You think I want to lose that farm? You think I want to tell them their father's grave belongs to someone else? Now, it's killing me, Jasper. Every single day it's killing me. Then let me help. This isn't help. She backed away from him, putting distance between them. This is you swooping in to fix everything because you can't stand to watch me struggle. This is you trying to buy something that isn't for sale. That's not fair. None of this is fair. Eleanor wiped her face with the back of her hand. I appreciate what you've done for us, more than I can ever say. But I won't be someone's charity bride. I won't spend the rest of my life wondering if you married me out of love or pity. It's not pity. Then what is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like a rich man trying to purchase a grateful wife. The words hit their mark. She saw it in the way Jasper flinched, the way his expression shuddered. Is that really what you think of me? His voice was quiet now, dangerously quiet. Eleanor wanted to take it back, wanted to unsay every cruel word that had just come out of her mouth. But her pride wouldn't let her. I don't know what to think, she said instead. I don't know anything anymore. Jasper stood there for a long moment, his jaw tight, his eyes unreadable. Then he nodded once. All right, he said. Your choice. I'll respect it. He walked out without another word. Eleanor stood alone in the kitchen, shaking sick with regret and something that felt terrifyingly like grief. She had done the right thing. She had protected herself, protected her children from depending on someone who might one day leave them. So why did it feel like she had just lost everything that mattered? The following days were agony. Jasper was polite, distant, unfailingly courteous, and completely closed off. He spoke to her only when necessary, ate his meals in silence, disappeared into his study after supper instead of sitting by the fire. The children noticed. Of course they noticed. Did you and Mr. Jasper have a fight? Grace asked one morning while Eleanor braided her hair. Adults don't have fights, sweetheart. Then why won't he talk to you anymore? Eleanor's hands stilled. Sometimes grown-ups just need space to think. About what? Complicated things. Is it about the farm? Grace twisted to look at her mother. Old Pete says the bankman is going to take our farm. Old Pete talks too much. Are we going to have to leave? Are we going to live in a wagon like that lady at the mercantile said? Grace? I don't want to live in a wagon, Mama. The girl's eyes filled with tears. I want to stay here with Mr. Jasper and old Pete and the horses and— Shh. Eleanor pulled her daughter into her arms. Everything's going to be all right. Promise? Eleanor held her tighter and said nothing at all. That afternoon she found Sam in the barn mucking out stalls with a violence that went far beyond what the task required. Sam? He didn't look up. Ma. Want to tell me what's wrong? Nothing's wrong. You've been stabbing that pitchfork into the hay like it owes you money. Sam's movement slowed, then stopped. He leaned on the pitchfork handle, his back to her. I heard you, he said. The other day, in the kitchen. Eleanor's stomach dropped. Sam, he asked you to marry him. Sam's voice was flat. He offered to save the farm, save all of us, and you said no. It's not that simple. Isn't it? Sam turned, and his eyes were blazing. He loves you, Ma. Anyone with eyes can see it. And you love him too. Don't pretend you don't. How I feel doesn't. It's everything. Sam threw down the pitchfork. You're going to let us lose our home, Pa's home, because you're too proud to admit you have feelings for someone who isn't Pa. That's enough. Is it because the way I see it, you're being selfish? You're putting your pride ahead of Will and Grace, ahead of me. His voice cracked. Pa's been dead for 18 months, Ma. He's not coming back. And I think he'd want you to be happy. I think he'd want all of us to be happy. You don't know what your father would want. I know he wouldn't want us homeless. Sam's anger was bleeding into something else, now fear maybe, or grief. I know he wouldn't want Grace crying every night because she's scared. I know he wouldn't want Will pretending everything's fine when he knows it isn't. We're falling apart, Ma, and you could fix it. You could fix everything. By selling myself to the highest bidder. By letting yourself love someone who loves you back. Sam's shout echoed through the barn. That's not selling yourself, Ma. That's living. That's choosing to be happy instead of choosing to be miserable and alone. Eleanor stared at her son, this boy who had grown into something resembling a man while she wasn't looking. 12 years old and already wise in ways that made her heart ache. When did you get so grown up? She whispered. When Pa died. Sam's voice was quiet now. When I had to. She crossed the distance between them and pulled him into her arms. He resisted for a moment, then collapsed against her, his shoulders shaking. I'm sorry, she said into his hair. I'm so sorry, Sam. Just talk to him. Sam's voice was muffled against her shoulder. Please, before it's too late. Eleanor held her son and thought about pride, about fear, about all the ways she had convinced herself that keeping everyone at arm's length was the same as staying safe. Maybe Sam was right. Maybe she was being selfish. Maybe her refusal to accept help, to accept love, was hurting everyone more than it was protecting them. I'll talk to him, she said finally. I'll try. Sam pulled back, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Tonight. She found Jasper in his study after supper, sitting at his desk with papers spread before him that he clearly wasn't reading. He looked up when she knocked, his expression guarded. Eleanor. Can we talk? He gestured to the chair across from his desk. She sat, her hands clasped in her lap to keep them from trembling. I said things, she began. The other day. Things I didn't mean. Which things? The part about you trying to buy a grateful wife. She forced herself to meet his eyes. That was cruel and unfair and not what I actually think. Jasper was silent, waiting. The truth is, I'm scared. The admission cost her everything. I loved Thomas with my whole heart. When he died, I thought that part of me died with him. I never expected to feel— She stopped, swallowed. I never expected to feel anything again. And do you— His voice was carefully neutral. Feel something. You know I do. I don't know anything. He leaned forward. You've spent weeks pushing me away, telling me you don't want my help, don't want my money, don't want anything I'm offering. How am I supposed to know what you feel when everything you do tells me to keep my distance? Because I'm afraid. The words burst out of her. I'm afraid of wanting something I might lose. I'm afraid of letting my children get attached to someone who might leave. I'm afraid of waking up one day and finding out this was all too good to be true. I'm not going anywhere, Eleanor. You don't know that. Thomas wasn't going anywhere either, and now he's dead. She was crying again, damn it. Everyone I've ever loved has left me. My parents, my husband, everyone. What makes you think you'll be any different? Jasper rose from his desk and came around to where she sat. He knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. I can't promise I won't die, he said quietly. That's not a promise anyone can make. But I can promise that as long as I'm breathing, I'll be here. For you. For Sam and Will and Grace. For whatever kind of family we can build together. Jasper. I'm not asking you to forget Thomas. I'm not asking you to stop loving him. I'm asking you to make room for something else alongside the grief. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. You told me once that we don't diminish. We just grow larger. Build new rooms in ourselves where other things can live. I said that about loss. Doesn't it work for love too? Eleanor looked at this man, this stubborn, generous, patient man who had walked into her life when she had nothing and offered her everything, who had defended her honor, fired men who insulted her, nearly died in a storm, and still woke up thinking about her, who was kneeling at her feet now, not demanding anything, just asking to be let in. The farm, she said, her voice rough. If I say yes, I need you to understand I'm not saying yes because of the farm. I know. I'm saying yes because, she took a shaky breath, because somewhere in the last few weeks, you became the person I look for when I walk into a room. Because your laugh makes me remember that life can still be good. Because my children love you and I... She couldn't finish. Couldn't say the words that felt too big, too dangerous, too real. I know, Jasper said again. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. I know. What happens now? Now we go see the preacher. A smile was breaking across his face, the first real smile she'd seen in days. Tomorrow morning, if that's all right with you. Tomorrow, but that's 2 days before the deadline. Plenty of time to file the papers and tell Harlan Briggs where he can put his foreclosure notice. Despite everything, despite the fear and the grief and the terrifying enormity of what she was agreeing to, Eleanor laughed. A real laugh, startled and bright. You've already thought this through. I've thought of nothing else since Christmas Eve. His eyes were warm, so warm. Since I saw you through that window at the Brass Kettle. Since I watched you swallow your pride and walk into Josiah's restaurant and eat like it was your first meal in days. It was, she admitted. I know. That's why I paid for it. He stood, pulling her up with him. That's why I offered you this job. Why I gave you my mother's room. Why I nearly froze to death in a blizzard thinking about getting back to you. He cupped her face in his hands. I was lost before you came, Eleanor. I just didn't know it until I found you. Jasper. She reached up, touched his face, felt the roughness of his jaw beneath her fingers. I don't know how to do this. How to be a wife again. How to let someone take care of me. We'll figure it out together. He pressed his forehead to hers. One day at a time. And if I make mistakes, then we'll fix them, together. And if I'm difficult and stubborn and impossible to live with, then I'll be just as difficult and stubborn right back. He was smiling against her skin. I'm not looking for easy, Eleanor. I'm looking for real. I'm looking for you. She kissed him then, or he kissed her, or they kissed each other. It didn't matter who moved first. What mattered was the feeling of his arms around her, solid and warm and safe. What mattered was the way her heart expanded in her chest until she thought it might burst. What mattered was the knowledge that for the first time in 18 months, she wasn't alone. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jasper rested his chin on top of her head and held her close. "We should tell the children," he said. "They'll be happy. Will's going to ask if he can live in the barn with the horses." Eleanor laughed again. It was getting easier. "Probably. And Sam." She thought about her eldest son, about his wise eyes and his heavy burdens and his fierce protective heart. "Sam already knows. He's the one who convinced me to talk to you. Remind me to thank him. You can thank him by being the man I know you are." She pulled back to look at him. He needs that, Jasper. Needs someone to show him that strength doesn't mean carrying everything alone. That asking for help isn't weakness. "I'll try," Jasper said. "I'll try to be whatever he needs. That's all any of us can do." They stood there in the study, holding each other as the fire crackled and the wind whispered outside, and somewhere in the house 3 children were sleeping, unaware that their world was about to change forever. Tomorrow would bring challenges. The wedding, the bank, the whispers that would surely follow when people learned that Eleanor McAllister had married Jasper Cole barely 2 months after arriving in town as a stranger. There would be judgment and gossip and people like Mabel Henderson clicking their tongues in disapproval. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight, Eleanor let herself believe that happiness was possible, that love could grow in unexpected places, that the heart, like the person who carried it, could survive unimaginable loss and still find room for something new. She had come to this town with nothing but 11 cents and 3 hungry children. She had been alone, afraid, and utterly without hope, and somehow, impossibly, she had found her way home. The children took the news better than Eleanor had dared to hope. Will whooped so loud that old Pete came running from the barn, thinking someone was hurt. Grace immediately demanded to know if she could call Jasper Papa, and whether this meant she'd get a new dress for the wedding. And Sam. Sam shook Jasper's hand with the solemnity of a man twice his age and said simply, "Take care of her." "I will," Jasper promised. "I give you my word." "And us. You're part of the package." Jasper's voice was rough with emotion. "All of you. For as long as you'll have me." Sam nodded once, then turned away, but not before Eleanor caught the shine of tears in his eyes. The morning of the wedding dawned cold and clear. Eleanor stood before the small mirror in the room that had been Jasper's mother's, smoothing the front of her best dress, a simple blue cotton that Clara Jenkins had helped her alter the night before, adding a bit of lace to the collar and cuffs. "You look beautiful, Mama." Grace stood in the doorway, her own dress freshly pressed her hair in careful braids. "Thank you, sweetheart." "Are you scared?" Eleanor considered the question. "A little." "Why, Mr. Jasper is nice. He makes you smile." "He does." "Then why are you scared?" Eleanor knelt down so she was at eye level with her daughter. "Because when we love people, there's always a chance of getting hurt. And sometimes that chance feels very big and very frightening." Grace thought about this. Old Pete says being scared is just being brave before you do the thing. Old Pete is very wise. He's also very old. Grace wrinkled her nose. "But I still like him." Eleanor laughed and pulled her daughter close. "So do I, sweetheart. So do I." The ceremony was simple. Reverend Whitmore performed it in the small church at the edge of town with only old Pete, Clara Jenkins, and the children in attendance. Eleanor had expected to feel nervous, had expected to hesitate when the moment came to speak her vows. But when she stood facing Jasper, his hands warm around hers, his eyes holding nothing but love and hope and quiet determination, the words came easily. "I do," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. "I do," Jasper echoed. And she saw the same conviction in his face, the same willingness to build something new from the ashes of what they'd both lost. When he kissed her gentle reverent, a promise made flesh, Eleanor felt something shift inside her. Not the closing of a door, but the opening of one. Thomas would always be part of her, would always hold a place in her heart that no one else could fill. But there was room now for something more, room for Jasper and the future they would build together. "Well," Clara said afterward, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, "I'd say that's the best thing to happen in this town since the railroad came through." "Don't let Mabel Henderson hear you say that," Eleanor replied. "Mabel Henderson can go soak her head." Clara squeezed Eleanor's hands. "I'm happy for you, both of you. You deserve this." The celebration was brief. There was work to be done after all, and a deadline still looming, but it was warm and real in a way Eleanor hadn't expected. Will ate 3 pieces of cake and had to be stopped from going for a 4th. Grace fell asleep in old Pete's lap, worn out from excitement. Sam sat beside Jasper, the two of them deep in conversation about something that made them both laugh. Eleanor watched it all and felt her heart expand until she thought it might overflow. "Mrs. Cole." Jasper appeared at her elbow, his voice low and teasing. "I believe you owe me a dance." "There's no music." "Then we'll make our own." He pulled her into his arms, and they swayed together in the middle of the church, no music but their own heartbeats, no audience but the people who loved them. It was silly and spontaneous and utterly perfect. "Thank you," Eleanor whispered against his shoulder. "For what?" "For not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to." Jasper's arms tightened around her. "Some things are worth waiting for." The next morning they rode into town together. Jasper had filed the marriage certificate with the county clerk the previous afternoon, and now they had one final piece of business to attend to. Harlan Briggs's office occupied the second floor of the Cedar Hollow Bank, a space designed to intimidate with its heavy furniture and looming portraits of stern-faced men. Eleanor had been here once before, 2 months after Thomas died, when she'd first learned the extent of her husband's debts. She remembered the way Briggs had looked at her then, not unkindly, but with the detached sympathy of a man who had seen too many widows in similar circumstances. Today, his expression was considerably less sympathetic. "Mrs. McAllister." He glanced up from his desk as they entered. "You're early. The deadline isn't until tomorrow." "It's Mrs. Cole now," Eleanor said, "as of yesterday." Briggs's eyebrows rose. His gaze shifted to Jasper, who stood just behind Eleanor's shoulder, his presence solid and reassuring. "I see." Briggs set down his pen. "My congratulations." "Thank you," Eleanor said. "Now about my farm." "Your farm." Briggs steepled his fingers. "Mrs. Cole, the situation hasn't changed simply because you've acquired a new husband. The debt remains. $243 plus interest. Unless you have that amount in hand, I do." Eleanor set a leather pouch on his desk. It landed with a satisfying thunk. Briggs stared at it. "I beg your pardon, $243. Eleanor kept her voice steady. "Plus $14 interest. Counted it myself this morning." "But—" Briggs seemed genuinely flustered. "Where did you—" "Does it matter?" Jasper spoke for the first time. "The debt is paid. The farm belongs to my wife. I trust there won't be any further discussion." Briggs opened the pouch and counted the money, his fingers moving quickly through the bills and coins. When he finished, his expression had shifted from surprise to something that might have been respect. "It appears to be in order," he said. "I'll have the paperwork drawn up. The deed will be transferred to Eleanor Cole." Jasper's voice was firm. "The farm belongs to her. It should stay in her name." Eleanor turned to look at him. "Jasper." "It was Thomas's land, your children's inheritance." He met her eyes. "I'm not taking that from you." She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to express what it meant that he would do this, give her everything, and claim nothing for himself. "Well," Briggs cleared his throat, "that's unusually generous, Mr. Cole." "Nothing unusual about it." Jasper's attention remained on Eleanor. "A man takes care of his family. That's all. They left the bank with the promise that the deed would be ready within the week. On the street outside, Eleanor stopped and gripped Jasper's arm. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. The money is nothing compared to what I've gained." He covered her hand with his own. "Eleanor, I didn't marry you for your farm. I didn't marry you to acquire property or expand my holdings. I married you because I love you, because I want to spend whatever years I have left waking up next to you. If that land had disappeared into the bank's coffers tomorrow, I would have felt exactly the same way." "Then why?" "Because it matters to you. Because it mattered to Thomas. Because Sam and Will and Grace deserve to know that their father's legacy is secure." He shrugged. "And because Harlan Briggs needed to learn that not everyone in this town can be pushed around." Despite herself, Eleanor smiled. "You enjoyed that?" "Maybe a little. The look on his face when I put that money on his desk. Priceless." Jasper was grinning now. "Worth every penny." She laughed a full, free laugh that drew glances from passers-by. She didn't care. Let them look. Let them wonder. Let Mabel Henderson and everyone like her whisper behind their hands. Eleanor Cole had just paid off her debts, saved her children's home, and married a man who loved her without condition or reservation. She had nothing left to prove to anyone. The ride back to the ranch felt different, lighter somehow. The weight Eleanor had been carrying for 18 months, the grief, the fear, the constant struggle hadn't disappeared entirely. But it had shifted, redistributed itself into something she could bear. When they arrived home, the children came running. Grace launched herself at Jasper with such force that he staggered back a step. Will demanded to know every detail of the confrontation with Mr. Briggs, clearly hoping there had been a fistfight. And Sam simply nodded at Eleanor, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "It's done?" he asked. "It's done. Good." He took a breath. "I'm glad, Ma. Really glad." "So am I." That night, after the children were in bed and old Pete had retired to the bunkhouse, Eleanor and Jasper sat together by the fire. They didn't speak much. Didn't need to. The silence between them was comfortable now, full of understanding rather than uncertainty. "I've been thinking," Jasper said eventually. "That sounds dangerous." He chuckled. "About the farm, your farm." "What about it?" "Spring's coming. The land will need working. I was thinking we could combine operations, run the cattle on both properties, share the labor." He paused. "Sam's getting old enough to learn proper ranching. Might be good for him to have a stake in something." Eleanor considered this. "You'd do that. Let a 12-year-old have responsibility over your cattle. He's not just any 12-year-old. He's smart, hard-working, and he's got good instincts." Jasper shrugged. "Besides, if he's going to inherit both properties someday, he ought to learn how to manage them." "Both properties." "Well," Jasper's voice was carefully casual. "You and I don't have any children together. Sam's your eldest. Seems logical he'd inherit what we build." Eleanor stared at him. "Jasper, we just got married yesterday. Are you already planning for after we're gone?" "I'm planning for the future. Our future. All of it." He took her hand. "I spent 5 years alone, Eleanor. 5 years with nobody to leave anything to. No purpose beyond getting through each day. I don't want to go back to that. I want to build something that lasts. Something that matters. And I want to build it with you." "What about Will and Grace?" "They'll be provided for. All 3 of them will. I've already spoken to my lawyer about updating my will." He squeezed her hand. "Your children are my children now. That's what marriage means to me. That's what family means." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. "You're a good man, Jasper Cole." "I'm a lucky man." He lifted her hand to his lips. "I got a second chance I never expected. I intend to make the most of it." The weeks that followed were full of changes. Eleanor moved her belongings from the McAllister farm to the Cole ranch, keeping the old house maintained but empty for now. They would decide later what to do with it, maybe fix it up for Sam when he was older, maybe rent it to a family in need. The options felt endless in a way they never had before. Sam threw himself into learning the ranching business with an intensity that surprised everyone. Jasper was patient with him, showing him how to read cattle, how to predict weather, how to manage money and resources. The sullen, wary boy who had arrived on Christmas Eve began to transform into something else, someone confident, capable, almost happy. "He's different," Eleanor said one evening, watching Sam help Jasper repair a fence in the distance. "I almost don't recognize him. He's becoming who he was meant to be." Old Pete sat beside her on the porch, whittling as always. "Just needed the right circumstances." "And Jasper." "That too." Pete's knife moved steadily over the wood. "A boy needs a man to look up to, someone who shows him what it means to be strong without being cruel. Sam had that in his father, but he lost it too young. Now he's got it again." "You think Jasper's good for him?" "I think Jasper's good for all of you." Pete glanced at her sideways. "And you're good for him. Best I've seen him in years, maybe ever." Eleanor watched her son laugh at something Jasper said, watched the easy camaraderie between them, and felt something settle in her chest. This was right. All of it. The marriage, the ranch, the blending of two broken families into something whole. It wasn't what she'd planned. Wasn't what she'd imagined when she'd stepped off that train on Christmas Eve with 11 cents in her pocket and terror in her heart. But maybe that was the nature of grace. It came in unexpected forms, through unexpected people at unexpected times. Spring arrived with a suddenness that took Eleanor's breath away. One week the land was brown and bare, and the next it was exploding with green. Wildflowers bloomed in the pastures. Calves stumbled on new legs through meadows thick with grass. The world felt new again, full of possibility. On a warm April morning, Eleanor stood at the fence watching the cattle graze. Jasper came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You're up early," he said. "Couldn't sleep." "Something wrong?" "No, something right." She leaned back against him. "I was just thinking about Christmas Eve. About standing outside Henderson's store with nothing. About how scared I was." "You didn't look scared." "I was terrified." She turned in his arms to face him. "But I was also determined. That's the only thing that kept me moving. Pure stubbornness. It's one of my favorite things about you." "Only one. There's a long list." He kissed her forehead. "Should I recite it?" "Maybe later." She smiled. "Right now, I just want to stand here with you and be grateful." "Grateful for what?" "Everything." She gestured at the land spread out before them, at the house behind them, where their children still slept at the life they were building together. 6 months ago, I thought my life was over. Thought the best I could hope for was survival. And now? Now you've got a stubborn rancher who can't cook and snores like a freight train. Now I've got a home." She touched his face. "A real home. Not just a building, but a place where I belong. People who love me. A future I actually want to live." Jasper's arms tightened around her. "You've got all that," he agreed. "And you always will, long as I'm breathing. And after that, Sam will take over and do a better job than I ever did." He grinned. "Boy's got a real head for this. Might even make something of himself." From the house came the sound of the door banging open, followed by Will's voice shouting something about breakfast. Grace's higher-pitched response floated across the yard, and then Sam's deeper tones telling both of them to quiet down before they woke the dead. "Sounds like our piece is over," Jasper said. "Sounds like our life is beginning," Eleanor replied. They walked back to the house together, hand in hand. Will ran to meet them, chattering about a dream he'd had. Grace demanded to be carried, and Jasper swung her up onto his shoulders without missing a step. Sam waited on the porch, a coffee cup in his hand, looking for all the world like the man of the house. "Morning," he said. "Morning." Jasper climbed the steps and clapped Sam on the shoulder. "Ready to check the north pasture after breakfast?" "Yes, sir." Sam caught himself. "I mean, yes. Either one works." Jasper smiled. "Long as you show up." They went inside together, all five of them, a family stitched together from loss and hope and stubborn determination. Old Pete was already at the stove burning eggs as usual, muttering about how nobody appreciated his cooking. "Pete, those eggs are smoking," Eleanor said. "They're supposed to smoke. It's called flavor. It's called a fire hazard." "Woman doesn't know fine cuisine when she sees it." Grace giggled. Will stole a piece of bacon from the plate. Sam rolled his eyes but couldn't hide his smile. And Jasper. Jasper watched it all with an expression of quiet wonder, like a man who had stumbled into a dream and couldn't quite believe it was real. Later that evening, after supper was eaten and dishes washed and children put to bed, Eleanor stood once more at the window of the room that had been Jasper's mother's. The room that was now hers. The room where she had spent so many nights wondering what would become of her family. Jasper came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "The first night we stayed here. How scared I was. How sure I was that this wouldn't last, that something would go wrong and we'd end up worse off than before. And now I think." She paused, searching for the right words. "I think that sometimes the worst thing that ever happens to you leads to the best thing. I think that losing Thomas, as terrible as it was, somehow led me here, to you, to this life I never imagined." "You think it was meant to be?" "I don't know about meant to be." She turned in his arms. "But I know that I'm grateful. For all of it. Even the hard parts. Because they brought me to this moment. To you." Eleanor Cole. Jasper's voice was husky. "I love you." "I know." She reached up and touched his face. "I love you too." It had taken her a long time to say those words. A long time to admit even to herself that what she felt for this man was real and lasting and worth the risk of loss. But she could say them now, could mean them, could trust that they wouldn't destroy her if everything fell apart. Because she knew now that she was stronger than she'd ever believed, that she could survive anything, that the human heart, like the human spirit, could be broken and rebuilt and emerge more beautiful than before. She had arrived in this town with nothing but her children and her determination. She had found work, found shelter, found a man who saw her as she truly was, and loved her anyway. She had paid her debts, saved her farm, and built a life worth living. And it had all started with a simple act of kindness, a stranger sharing his plate with a hungry woman on Christmas Eve. Eleanor thought about that night often, about the way Jasper had looked at her through the window of the brass kettle, about the way he had offered help without expectation, about the way everything that followed had grown from that single moment of grace. She thought about Thomas too, about the years they had shared, the children they had made, the dreams they had dreamed. She would never stop loving him, never stop missing him. But she had learned that grief and joy could coexist, that honoring the past didn't mean refusing the future. She had learned that love, like hope, could be lost and found again. And standing here now in the arms of a man who had given her everything without asking for anything in return, Eleanor McAllister Cole finally understood what it meant to be home. Not a place, not a building, not a piece of land with a deed and a fence. Home was the people who loved you, the family you chose, the future you built together one day at a time from whatever broken pieces life had left behind. Home was here. Home was now. Home was real. And Eleanor Cole was never going to let it go.